Yeah. So Priyan, thanks for the talk. That was, you most of the parts that you covered was pretty much what I wanted to focus on as well. Is to kind of focus on this deep-rooted epistemological dichotomy, but also the fact that how the language of science and data, the language that science and data speaks is not something that's accessible, or the way the contemporary science speaks this language is not accessible to generally to the public and whatnot, so it makes it very exclusionary. And I think yeah, so I'm going to share a bit of my own experiences working with not necessarily strictly citizen science, but mostly with regards to, uh, you know, I would call it more participatory efforts. I don't know what exactly to frame each of those under. So I'll get straight into the three case studies that I thought would be useful to uh, you know, kind of ask a few more interesting questions, given that citizen science is becoming a big, it is a very powerful tool, no questions about that. It is a very, it has much bigger scope than just the data or the science part of it. Um, but are we, and given that there's a lot more initiatives coming up in the same, with regards to participatory approaches, I think it's also critical to think about where we are going with the whole initiative. What are some of those driving forces behind these initiatives? So these are just three case studies. One is from the work I'd done close to, closer to Mahabalipuram on the Coromandel coast, with a few partner groups who work there, specifically on issues related to coastal development and all of that. This is a particular case study from a specific village called Panayur Periyakupam. Then I'm also going to show a little bit share a bit of our work from Lakshadweep, which is also kind of uh, sharing some of the work that we've done with the communities there, the fisher communities there. And there's another initiative called Reeflog that is, we've attempted in the Andaman group of islands as well, right? So getting to Panayur Perikupam is a small village closer to Mahabalipuram. If anyone has driven down that road on the East Coast Road would know that it's a, uh, you know, that that entire stretch used to be a beautiful, sandy ecosystem with extensive sand dunes and all of that. Uh, so yeah, it it's in one of those areas this place is located. There was a large project that was planned to set up a massive thermal power plant and a port to kind of facilitate the thermal power plant. A lot of the EIA work and all of that was done, which clearly had omitted a lot of details, specifically the presence of sandy beaches, sand dunes, and all of that. Particularly sand dunes is focused here mainly because under CRZ, if there is a sand dune or a mangrove and all of that, they are categorized as CRZ under CRZ1, which means there's a very strong regulation on what kind of activities can be done there. And yeah, so when a few folks reached out to kind of critically assess this EIA, we also realized that there's not enough evidence to show published, so-called scientifically published reports that indicated the presence of dunes there. I went there, worked with a small group of villagers there, in just one small village. Went there in the morning, quickly figured. There's this very simple survey tool called Emery method of profiling the beaches used. Quickly trained up some people to do this, survey, and it was entirely the communities who went ahead with a few, local activist people as well to kind of do the profiling exercise. And by 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the evening, we did about five transects close to that village. And yeah, after that, that was compiled as a report, which you see here on the right side. A lot of the local community members were involved in it, are authors on that as well. And this was submitted as a counter to the EIA in various court proceedings and all of that. And it clearly indicated the presence of really healthy sand dunes, which is, as you can see, some of them even higher than 11 meters. So and even as wide as more than half a kilometer wide. So there were extensive sand dunes present there, and this was used to contest in the court. And I think in early 2019, Jan 2019, there was an expert advisory committee that was set up to assess this, and they uh, kind of uh, you know did not give the project the go ahead based on the ZIA, and the entire EIA was asked to be done again. And I think there are other issues also. So it's not just this report. Not to say that this report made all those changes, but the just that this report was also done used. So this is an example of a very specific issue. People concerned with getting displaced. Um, you know, there were real threats to their existence in a particular area, where people did this exercise not to contribute to science, not to contribute to the larger knowledge or whatever, but just to make sure that their villages were safe, right? And then I'll go to the Lakshadweep Islands, which is a fairly long-term engagement. We've been working there since 2014 on this particular, initiative that I'm going to talk about. Is about the fisheries there in that area in Lakshadweep. Um, yeah, I should also say something about the community also in advance. Is that the community in Lakshadweep is very literate, 99% literacy or more, very similar to Kerala. So I think these are important things to factor in before thinking about who are going to be your participants in your contemporary science-based, data-heavy kind of initiatives. And it's also a homogeneous system, which primarily, literally 100% Islamic community as well. Um, so yeah, just giving you some background about the community and about the fisheries. Also, they practice live bait pole and line tuna fisheries, which supports provides livelihoods for a fairly large percentage of the communities there. It's one of the economic mainstays of those islands. It helps divert the fishing pressure off the reefs, as one of our colleagues put it. It's pretty much the fish that saved the reefs. The skipjack tuna that they target there, which is also a very resilient tuna species. Their turnover rates are pretty high, and there is pretty much zero bycatch when with this particular fishery. There's no impact on the habitats as well. So it's one of the probably I would say it's probably one of the most sustainable fishing practices in India, probably the world as well. The way it's practiced in Lakshadweep. Yeah. So it's not as all rosy. The fisheries itself was going through a lot of transitions. There was again, as usual, there's a heavy whatever gap in data, and there's also you know there's also, because the resources were being not sufficiently managed well, there's a strong decline in certain kinds of resources. I just wanted to tell one more thing here, is that the live bait part of it is critical, because that's one of the limiting resource to this particular fisheries, because live bait is harvested from within the reefs, and then people keep the fish alive and take it as bait out to the sea, and to lure the tuna in. So while the tuna stocks may be available in plenty, may or may not be available in plenty, the live bait is a very limited resource. And look, and also kind of located within small spatial scale, so easily open to overharvest. So what was even more striking was that there's a need, and this is nothing new, but something that, especially in a place like Lakshadweep, where the managers as well as the community members are all from the local, I mean, are pretty much local island. There's this lack of connect between, or the role for fishers to play in making any management decisions, despite seeing and observing in their day-to-day lived lives. They engage with the sea and oceans, with the resources. They have fairly good understanding of the biology of the species. I mean, the entire fishing is based on an understanding of the behavior of the tuna. So, it's surprising how we don't feel the need to engage with them while coming up with decisions. A lot of the decisions are made centrally, sitting elsewhere in Delhi, while the management implications are being felt at the local level. And also in terms of collecting information, it's surprising that we don't see this large constituency group as people who could contribute to knowledge. Yeah. So like I said, there are, you know, fisher communities in particular are, repositories of humongous amounts of information. It's not codified in data, which is the only way science accepts data. It's data of a different sort, which clearly has. So this is the language and the dichotomy that that Priyan was talking about. And like I said, there's most of these decisions are either made by scientists who have access to this particular codified data, and the managers and policymakers, right? There's barely any space in this for the fisher communities, and our main objective of beginning this monitoring program was not such a strong focus on the quality of the data, or or do we need data, but rather to look at it as a bridge to decentralize and democratize knowledge generation, and to kind of facilitate a two-way exchange of knowledge, not to keep fishermen as passive whatever producers, or even if they were involved in collecting information, not as again, as Priyan said, as field assistants who just generate data, but rather as active contributors to the knowledge. And we started this process in a consultative manner. It was a co-created data sheet. We had extensive consultations on four big fishing islands, um, with regards to what is it that they wanted first to collect, because it's not all about what we as scientists need, but also what is it that they needed. And we also explained to them what is it that we need to kind of understand what is happening with the trends. And it's every boat, or every fisherman knows exactly what is happening in his in this case in Lakshadweep, uh, you know uh, in his particular boat, because they see it on a day-to-day basis. They don't need to be told what is happening with trends and all of that. But at an island level, this is something that they were very interested to know what is happening at an island level, and at the entire Lakshadweep archipelago level, what is happening with the fisheries was something they were interested in. We explained concepts like catch per unit effort and all of that, and how to integrate. I mean, how some of that knowledge is critical, not just about how much is harvested, but how much of effort is going into all of that. So it was a co-created model. We did multiple iterations. But one other thing I'd like to also highlight is that what we also put in a lot of effort is to, at the end of every season, we collect these data logbooks back, and then go back and translate it, or convert it into data on Excel sheets. And then at the beginning of the next season, we go back to each and every boat owner and share this data back. So um, both for their particular boats, as well as generally for the island, and for the entire uh, you know this is like a personalized feedback form, that not feedback form, like a report that we give to each and every boat. And we feel that has been very, very crucial in sustaining some interest in the fisher communities. Not to say that everyone was participating very actively, even though people did want to do it. Quite often, various other reasons, their ability to contribute is not so much. The only agreement we've made with the fisher communities is that we will ensure anonymity of the data. None of those data sets would be traceable back to their boats. They had concerns about sharing, I mean, others knowing exactly how much fish they had harvested in a particular season and all of that. So that anonymity is the agreement we've made with them. This is not publicly available data. This is data that has been collected by them. If we share the data set, the agreement is we'll only share generalized data, not data that's, again, like I said, traceable back to a particular boat owner. And most of the time, we do consult with them about what can be shared and what cannot be shared. It's been running for 4 years now. 5 years is a bit outdated. It's been on. I mean, because of the COVID situation and all of that, we haven't had access to the islands. Some of us were there by local islanders, but because of the limited movement and connectivity, we really haven't been able to gather data for the last 2 seasons. But we've had about 4,000 odd fishing expedition records. Um, yeah, also wanted to say that it's an entirely voluntary one. There's no monetary or other kinds of incentives. There is a certain kind of incentive that we do give. I'll talk about that later. Just sharing quickly some of the data that had come through this. This is specifically with regards to bait fish, which, like I said, is a very limited resource affecting the fisheries. Um, this is with regard to skipjack, fish that's caught. And again, this particular data set was collected because the fisher communities wanted to collect this. They wanted to know whether fish caught at the FAD was significantly smaller. Are they doing recruitment fishing? You know, and actually what we found is that we didn't find so much variation with the skipjack tuna, but the yellowfin tuna that's caught closer to the FADs actually with showed significantly smaller ones were caught closer to the FADs, which meant that fish that could grow to much larger sizes were being harvested way before they could grow to their maximum size. Island wise as well, there were significant variations that we saw. This is averaged out to a boat level, how much variations have happened, but also quickly sharing a bit of the incentivization process. How we incentivize participation of the community members in this is by giving those specific boats that have done a good job. We Every year we publish these calendars and circulate it across the islands. It For the local people there, it's a huge. I mean, they're very happy to get receive these calendars because it's very Lakshadweep specific content. It's not always about the fisheries, but the main, not always about the catch monitoring program, but it's also other kinds of messaging about sustainability and all of that. And in this, we put pictures of specific boats, right, who have contributed them, along with the name of the owners and the crew members there, which is like a sort of a small incentive for them to have their boat pictures highlighted. So 12 boats at the most we kind of put every year, and the others are put in the at the end we just put all the other rest of the boats who participated in a bunch. So that's the incentive that's provided. But what I'd like to highlight, and I think this is very critical when one is thinking about participatory information generation or participatory efforts, is not just to keep it to just monitoring, because that's for us monitoring more than the quality of the data or all of that. It's what has been critical is the kind of uh, conversations that it's facilitated with regards to trends, with regards to resource availability, and now we are able to talk to them about actual resource management, and talking about small fish reserves for bait fish, banning harmful practices. So in 2019, towards the end of 2019, before the COVID and all of that happened, we had actually managed to, through multiple meetings, the community members had actually, along with the fisheries department and other key agencies, panchayats and all of them sitting, had agreed to ban three harmful practices that they identified could be done quite easily. We said, let's not get into too many complicated things, at least low hanging fruits. What are those things that everyone agrees we can ban? So banning using lights, high intensity lights, was something that they decided to ban. Use of really small mesh nets to catch the bait, and also waste dumping the tuna waste back into the lagoon. So these are the three things that on all these four islands, or at least on three islands, the community members had agreed and have gone ahead, had decided to go ahead with this. The fisheries department had offered to send in a circular which hasn't come out yet. We will have to go back and follow up on those, but still, it's believe it's a good step towards, so let's not just stick with or stop with the data, but also think about taking it a lot more forward, because you're engaging in, using people's time and effort in collecting certain kinds of information. It's really critical to transition it from just monitoring to management. The other initiative that I talked about is a reflog initiative. This would probably fall under the contemporary citizen science definition, the way a lot of it is done in recent years, right? And this is something that is meant to monitor reef ecosystems in the Andamans, and it targets basically recreational divers and other kinds of divers who have an opportunity to get inside the water and see what's going on there, right? So again, which means it is only a certain kind of privileged group who can participate in this, who can afford diving at a recreational level. So this is, and what they're contributing is entirely out of their own altruistic interest. There are no direct stakes involved in it. And these are the slates that we have designed. It's simple tally marks put against each of those. um, yeah, the way that species have been selected is based on their functional roles, indicators, key indicators, and easily identifiable species. This is how some of the data can be collected. It's pretty simple, straightforward tally marks that one needs to put. Um, Sorry, I'm just gonna pick up. Yeah, so that's it. And I'd like to kind of quickly conclude this by just showing the differences between these three initiatives. And I mean, the Panayur one, for instance, was, what was the motivation behind it? It was a very immediate concern facing the very survival of a certain, you know, community, people living, residing in a village, right? And it was initiated, I mean, the technique and technology for that was something that, me as a science practitioner had transferred to them, but it was completely implemented by the community group members. I just helped put the report together, and analyze some of the data and put that report together. Again, very simple work, no rocket science associated with it. uh, Also, this was to secure the rights of the villagers, and the scope was very short. It was less than 2 months to collect. It just took half a day to collect that data, another 1 month, or it could have been much less, or 1.5 months to finish the entire report and get it out to, submit it to the relevant authorities. Motivation was direct benefits. Data rights were with the communities. They have authorship over it. It still stays with them. Stakes involved were very high. There were quite high stakes for the participants in this initiative. The Lakshadweep initiative, on the other hand, was, to monitor long-term trends, and, it linked to their livelihoods, but it was more from an need to understand what is actually happening with their resources. Those were co-created protocols. There were both local community members and fisheries managers who would have benefited from this. It was fairly long term, and it can still continue. And motivation, like I said, was to just understand the larger tents, and like I said, also getting the boats and names on the calendars, and get some, uh, you know there was some feel good factor associated with it. Um, Data rights owned by the communities, like I said, we have permission to use aggregated data sets, but data traceability is something that is not permitted, and it's not open data. And stakes involved are medium. There's not much, whatever, losses in not participating in it. And reflog is an entirely, targeting urban educated privileged communities who can afford, recreational diving, more like a long term thing. And what is motivating people is just this feel good factor that, oh, I'm doing my two bits to the environment, or whatever the cost, right? So I think I'd like to wrap this up with a few questions, put just a few questions out there. It's not that I have any answers to these, but I think these are very critical to think about these questions before embarking on a citizen science initiative, or any initiative that, involves people. And I think it's very important to kind of be very clear about who are those people, citizens who are participating in the citizen science. Is it the science that is important? Is it the participation that's very important? What is the motivation behind doing all of this, both for the people who are initiating and facilitating this, as well as for the participants? It could be anything. There's no right or wrong to these things, but just I think it's very important to identify and clearly understand that, and also look beyond data. Why is data so important? Like I said, what data, more than the data, what this process enables is that process of engagement itself, just going out and collecting data as a group, as a community, youngsters, older people, all of them together, and engaging on these conversations is actually a much powerful thing than getting a few data points. I feel we're really missing the picture by not looking at that big opportunity that it provides, and just simplifying it to a data collection exercise. And also, how do we, like Priyan said, how do we break these barriers? It's not an easy thing, because different languages are spoke by, different uh, different kinds of, knowledge practitioners. So yeah, there's some funders and donors who've gone into facilitating this work in different parts of the geographies that I mentioned. A lot of team members have contributed to this knowledge. It's not all mine. So just wanted to thank them as well.